All right, we are on air. So welcome everybody to our first PLN4UDL Hangout. We're talking with some great district practitioners about UDL questions and lessons. I want to present this very quickly as it's loading.
Look at my jeans pocket in my room.
So we'll be recording this, and then we'll be putting it in our MyPlace and on our YouTube, so that future generations can say that's where it all started. That's where the magic was. So without further ado, I want everybody to kind of get a chance to introduce themselves, and I'm going to let Melissa Krieger take it from there. Let me stop sharing. All right, go ahead, Melissa.
Hi, I'm Melissa Krieger. I'm an English teacher at Novi High School. That's about it.
Hi, I'm Megan Taylor. I am a special education teacher at Novi High School.
There's three of us in Novi.
Hey, Laura.
I'm Laura Cummings, Educational Technology Consultant at Oakland Schools, and longtime advocate for UDL. Happy to be here tonight.
I think I'm up.
Yes,
hey,
you are.
I'm saying hi. Hi, I'm Jane Strunk. I'm semi-retired special education consultant from Oakland Schools, and also a longtime advocate of UDL.
And I'm Ted Strunk. I've taught 25 years at a private school called Upland Hills, and I taught 7th and 8th grade, and became familiar with UDL through my wife and Brian. Tried to implement it several times in my classroom, and got a lot of questions.
That's good. We like questions. We like questions. Brandy?
I'm Brandy Wilson. I'm a EI teacher at West Bloomfield High School and also a teacher consultant.
And then Armin?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
All right. Oh, gosh. Glad I didn't swear. Hi, I'm Armin Goulian. I'm a speech and language pathologist. Hi, Brandy.
Hi, Armin.
And I work in Hazel Park Schools, and I've done everything, but right now I'm doing a lot of AAC, or the extreme end of UDL, with students with autism and severe multiple impairments. And my daughter's about to come in right now, so I'll mute me so that I can not disturb the rest of the Hangout.
And then we have a newcomer, Jules. I saw you slipped in there. Can you unmute yourself and kind of give yourself an intro?
Hi. I don't see. I guess you can. Hi, I'm Jules. I'm also a speech language pathologist like Armin, and I work with elementary and middle school.
Awesome.
Will you leave it there for both people?
And I'm going to everybody wave to Armin's daughter. All right, then go ahead, Angelina.
Angelina
Krieger. I am a social studies, specifically world history teacher at Novi High School.
What comes after it was too long? Oh yeah, I tried to perform it. I tried to perform it.
And I'm Brian Dean, and I'm a special ed consultant at Oakland Schools and instructional designer. So the format for tonight is really just kind of an open-ended conversation, talking about questions that people may have around UDL, as well as some suggestions on how to get started and where we are in our practice. Laura will be piping in with the people that are on the Twitter chat. If you are watching us live right now using the hashtag PLN4UDL on your Twitter, we'll send you over to us, and then we'll address those questions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to whoever wants to get started.
So tonight, really what it's about is kind of answering your burning questions about UDL and, you know, just having an open conversation about, you know, where we see our practice at. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to kick it off and get started.
Well, so I guess my first question would be, how did everybody kind of get started in UDL? How long have you been involved in UDL? You know, where did your practice start? Just kind of some real quick demographics so we can kind of get an idea.
So how about you, Brian? What's your story?
Oh, it's a long tale. It's a harrowing tale.
We'll make it short.
So I actually didn't know that I was doing UDL when I was doing UDL. And I think that's a running theme that plays often through something as deep as UDL. I was really thinking that I was working with differentiated instruction. I started working in a residential treatment facility, working with students and adjudicated youth. So we would get students for 2 weeks, or we would get students for 3 years. And there were these huge skill gaps that were happening with students. So I needed to find a way to restructure my environment and restructure the way that I was delivering instruction so that students could get what they needed. And I thought that was just, you know, survival really at that point. And then I met Jane Strunk, who said, "Hey, this thing that you're doing, it's a lot like UDL." And so we started talking, and that's when the idea of UDL really started kind of coalescing. And I started saying, well, a lot of my practice already has this stuff, and that's how I started deepening my practice. Is that short? Is that good?
What about you, Melissa?
Oh, I always say I was raised with it. So I kind of didn't know. My mom knew Jane and worked with Jane and worked also with Laura with UDL, and she was part of the original Stella project. So she had implemented it in her classroom and was ultimately raising her children that way. There was a lot of choice theory in my house. So I started in a similar school like Brian did, with abandoned, abused, and adjudicated kids. And again, you'd have them for a short period of time. And so there was a lot of meeting students where they were at and giving them the opportunity to kind of own their curriculum. And that was when I learned what I was doing was UDL at a secondary level, which didn't look that much different than what my mom was doing at elementary, but it was. So that's me.
Okay, Jane, how about you?
Me? Okay, I came into UDL through my head, not through my practice. So when I started working at Oakland Schools about 6 years ago, I was assigned actually to work with a learning services consultant in a project titled the Writing Collaborative. And my piece was to embed UDL with the participants who came to this, and it was a 2 to 3 year project. So that's how I jumped into it at first, intensely.
Laura?
I went into a classroom after 8 years out of a classroom working as a tech coach, and I was invited to join a group of 5 people from my school to go to the Stella project that Melissa mentioned, that was strategies and tools to enhance learning for all. But they had added UDL Stella, and so that's when I was first introduced to Universal Design for Learning. And we learned about it, and we were coached in it. It was a year-long professional learning, site visits from Oakland Schools staff, as well as day-long workshops out at Oakland Schools, and that began the journey. And Melissa's mom was one of my teammates.
Jules or Armin?
Unmute. All right. Mine's similar, I think, to what a lot of people said, is I was doing UDL without realizing it. But a question I have, and I don't want to end this conversation, is yesterday I was part of a Twitter chat too that talked about sort of UDL versus differentiated instruction, and to me there's a lot of overlap in there, and I'm curious about how people are using those terms differently, because for me they're not interchangeable, but I feel like there's a lot of overlap. And then to throw another jargony term in there, like I feel like UDL and like formative assessment have to be close together. We have to know where students are to know where, how to differentiate or how to, give them access basically. So yeah, that didn't really answer this question, but it's the new question I have.
No, I think that's perfect because that's really what we want to do. We want to have this good conversation. Armin, do you want to kind of say how you came to UDL, and then we can go back and answer Jules' question for her or have a good conversation around that?
Armin may still be interacting with her daughter and not listening right now.
Okay, how about Megan then, and we'll come back to Armin.
Well, my journey in UDL world actually started with an invitation to more of a co-teaching collaboration, and I went to the UDL conference last year at Oakland Schools with my teammate over there, and I think that when I first sat down in the conference, it felt kind of like a special education conference because there were so many letters combined together floating around in the air. Everyone was speaking this UDL world. But I soon realized that it was something that I did every day and something that we could really incorporate into the co-teaching world to help just make a classroom that was accessible for everybody, that didn't have to have a label on it for this person or that person. So that was my beginning of the journey for UDL.
And I think I'll finish, and then we can go back to Armin. Or Armin, are you unmuted now?
I think so.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Can you share your story?
Sure. I guess I started, again, like most of you, doing it and not knowing that I was doing it when I worked in the high school and the middle schools in our district. And then in 2011, I went to a MITS conference where I was speaking, and the keynote speaker, it was all about UDL, and my thing was, what the hell is UDL? And then it just kind of turned us on to this whole movement. So that's what started me. I guess it would be the Michigan Integrated Technology and Supports in 2011.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And so I teach with these lovely ladies at Novi. I'm Angelina, and my co-teacher last year was actually Megan. So we got to practice what choice would look like and kind of working with UDL and creating different learning areas for our students together, which was one of the best experiences. But I also was fortunate enough to start my career with Melissa at a school for at-risk and adjudicated youth and abandoned and abused youth. So we, out of necessity, kind of had to meet our students where they were at. And so I can relate with Brian, where I was doing UDL and not knowing I was doing UDL until Melissa clued me in and let me know, hey, there's this thing that you happen to be doing, and you should probably read these books and meet these people. And so that's how I kind of got interconnected with all of these fine folks. So thank you. To my two co-partners there. So I would like to get back to Jules' question. If Brandy is Brandy also muted, or is she able to speak? Because I'd like her to share her journey as well if she can. Brandy?
Yeah, it froze up for a second.
Okay.
I guess I've been nominated in my school to learn about UDL, and that's how I went to the last conference. I don't know what I do. I basically, again, like with differentiated instruction, a lot of it's the same, other than UDL is more proactive. That's the only difference that I see.
Okay. So thank you, and I think that's a great segue to get back to Jules' question. You know, what is this difference between differentiated instruction and UDL, and is there a difference, and what are kind of some of those tangible things that we can see that would be different? So anybody that would like to, take the floor to start that conversation?
Well, I think one of the key things that Brandy said was that, UDL is proactive, and I think that that's hugely important. To me, differentiation is this idea of there's a place for it, and I want to make sure that that's on record of me saying that. These are times that I get accused of saying that I don't believe in differentiation. I do. I just believe that it's not the first place you go. Right? Differentiation is something that we do for a very, very small population. And then an even smaller population than that is the group that we modify our actual curriculum for. UDL is by its very nature and by its very name, it's about designing designing universally, where differentiation is about designing for an individual.
Well said.
I would agree.
I'm going to put a link in the chat. It's a document from the National whatever UDL Association, and it's a comparison of differentiation in UDL. So let me grab that and stick it in here. See if it's clickable. So from the National UDL Center. It's interesting, and we can agree or disagree, but it kind of describes both and then talks about the intersection. So that may be helpful too, especially if you have dialogues with your colleagues. Some of you said you're taking the lead on this back in your schools and districts. So this may be a good document to have out for a discussion.
I think too, if I may, there's a little bit of a difference between UDL and differentiation to me. Is differentiation is a little bit more of a requirement for a specific student, and I think additionally design becomes more of a choice. Like when a student has more a range of opportunities that are available to them, whereas differentiation, it's almost like they have to do it that way or they're required to do it that way. So I like the universal design piece because it gives the student more ownership of what they're actually working on. So that's one of the differences I find as well. But.
And I think also as we move along the continuum, it's easier to distinguish UDL from differentiation as we move through K-12. So in a primary grade, especially if we hold true to this idea of voice and choice being two major components to UDL, in primary grades that becomes very hard. What does that begin to look like, and how do we know that it's effective? How do we know that it's it's meeting the needs that we need to meet? But as we get further and further along of the continuum and getting to those secondary groups, we can start to offer that choice. The caveat to that, though, I would push on is this idea that once students hit like 9th grade, we say you're responsible for your learning, and at no point in a bureaucratically driven system like public education have we given them the ability to have that choice, right? To really exercise small parts of that choice, and then we tell them you have all the choice you want, or you're in charge of your own learning and where it goes. But they haven't built the skills to do that, right? They haven't built the maturity of their own learning. So I wonder how if anybody has any thoughts on how that would be addressed.
So
go ahead.
I know for Megan and myself, to address your question, we had a kind of a unique experience where we were a co-teaching team in a partially gen ed, partially special education population classroom, and that gradual release of choice throughout the year, because UDL is not necessarily the norm in our building or in our district even. So the gradual release of that responsibility or that choice to students was done throughout the year for us. We also teach juniors. So the last project of the year, the students had complete free reign to choose whatever they wanted in all of these different categories, and it was a culminating activity of their learning for the year. And that was like a beautiful example of what they were able to do by the time we were able to allow them enough opportunities to kind of pick and choose small pieces. And so, for us, that really worked. Now, had our students had opportunities at lower grades, like you were mentioning, Brian, to build in some of those choice opportunities, I think we would have been in a different place starting out, but we really had to start small, and that was okay. And it was uncomfortable for our students, even those small changes. But they saw their progress, and they really took ownership of their learning and felt very empowered through the process.
I would agree with that. I think starting small, maybe a chunk of the unit, we started to give more choices in units that were perhaps the kids had more knowledge base of, prior knowledge, and so they were able to bring more information and then make the choice about the curriculum that we offered, instead of something totally new and something totally foreign to them, and then trying to make a choice. So I think that having the prior knowledge is something that they can work with. It's easier to start the UDL choices than something completely that they've never seen before and totally foreign, and then on top of that to make choices, if that makes sense.
So then Jane, Jane and Armin, and Jules, you're a speech path. Where are you speech path at, Jules? You're muted. I'll come back to you. Oh, there you go.
Hello. I work at a school for kids with language-based learning disabilities in New York City.
Okay. So Jane, I know I kind of am targeting you on this one, but everybody jump in. What is that choice matrix or that choice idea? What does that look like in that 1% population? Because I know that's a lot where your work is. So that's always a part that's really been interesting to me, because being able to scaffold it and build it in our 99% population, it's not as hard, I don't think. So.
Right, and I'll say Armin also is very familiar with the 1% population, so jump in, Armin, anytime.
Sure.
So it certainly is not, this is a very broad word, but free choice. With the 1%, it's choice within some boundaries. And it involves, yes, Brian, scaffolding and instructing kids and practicing on how to make choices within maybe a very small array of options.
Can I ask a question?
Just did.
Okay. All right, because I'm just trying to understand this. But okay, so today in class, my students were doing a inference writing, and this is in a learning strategies class because we're trying to build writing skills. One of the students brought up how in the middle school they used to watch CNN Students News, and they used to do reflections. So he asked, can we do that? So I turned it on, and he was allowed to watch it while he was writing his assignment for today, but I also said for Monday we could incorporate that as part of our writing lesson if that's what he chose to do. Would that be a form of UDL?
Yes. You know, I mean, it depends on how you're using it. What is his goal? Would be, I guess, my question.
If we have to write like a reflection, instead of him writing a reflection based on a story, he's writing it based on the news.
I would say you're really addressing engagement to start off.
I mean, this is a student that doesn't like to write in general anyway. So if this is what's going to get him engaged, I guess, and to write something of quality, I think it might get him to do more than what he typically does.
Would this be something that you'd offer the rest of the student body as an option? You feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, because actually it would be playing on the Promethean board during class, and they would have other options to write as well, which is what, you know, story or what type of reflection they want to write about.
So Brandy, to me, it's not the fact that the student's doing something different. And Jules, I see that you put in the chat that to you that's also differentiation. And the fact that the student would be working on a different assignment is the differentiation part. However, the fact, and pardon me, Megan, you highlighted this, the fact that it's playing and it's open for all students to make a choice to do, that's really the UDL portion. So the differentiation is built into the environment, and students are using what they're becoming goal-directed, and they're becoming really advocates for what they need, right? So that's where UDL comes in. That's the choice that they're making. The fact that you are opening up the environment and letting it be there and helping them scaffold those goals and scaffold that choice making, that's really the UDL portion. And I think that's where it gets slippery, right, everyone? That's where it gets real slippery, because which part is, which part isn't. How do you hold water in your hand, right?
I mean,
go ahead.
To a degree, it doesn't matter what we call it. I just want what's, you know, like we all said, we did UDL before knowing what it is. So I think I've been calling a lot of UDL differentiation, and I continue to do it. So there's a degree to it that doesn't matter, but I do want to be right about terminology for, you know, providing professional development to others. But that's something, the example Brandy said, is something that I would absolutely entertain. It doesn't matter what you call it. If it gets kids engaged and they write more and, you know, you can scaffold it, then, you know, that's what matters, I guess. But I am still interested. Yeah.
Right, and I think that you know, there's a lot of talk nationally about what is UDL, what isn't UDL, and really that separation between differentiation and UDL. But if we look at it as this idea of UDL as a framework, it's not an evidence-based practice, it's a framework. It's an evidence-based framework. We've done a lot of research about it for 30 years, but that all of a sudden becomes something very different if we start talking about it in terms of theoretical frameworks.
I think if somebody provided an example of a lesson that involved UDL and differentiation and said, this is UDL and this is differentiation, we could compare the two. But I think, like, everybody, like, I'm trying to imagine what it is, and I don't know, I couldn't clearly define it. When I went back after the conference, they said, well, what is it? I said, well, basically it's proactive differentiation. I said, that's what I got out of it.
I kind of think of it like UDL is the car. We're offering everyone a car, and differentiation is the detailing on the car. Everybody's different. That detail is going to look different for everybody. But the actual car, the medium for the learning process, for anybody in that area, it's kind of like you said, the framework, and then the differentiation is the fine details that perhaps you need to add for that specific student. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But.
So in that 1% population, would that be, Jane, maybe you can comment on this. So like if we're all writing and we're writing, there's no topic, you get to choose your topic. So depending on either what you point to, what you don't throw away, what you don't eat, whatever picture you choose to write about, that's what you're writing about, and there's the choice. Okay. And then the differentiation would be, are you using an alphabet board? Are you using a keyboard? Are you dictating it? Are you using eye gaze? Do they, they get to pick? I see what you're saying about that, but is it really a slippery slope? Like, does it have to be so binary that it's one or the other?
What you just described, Armin, that makes sense to me, is what it might look like in a classroom for the students taught to the alternate assessment. The other piece I would add to that is free reign of choice is really hard for the learners that Armin and I are talking about. So that's where these various kinds of lessons might come in on, what are sources for ideas? Where do writers get your ideas to write about? And explore that. So so they know where to go. It isn't just a picture file. It could be, a picture list on the classroom wall. It could be some audio recordings. It could be something on their AAC device, where those options are. But multiple places where they have been exposed to make some choices for writing. And yes, the differentiation piece is what are those alternate ways that they're going to use to express themselves. We call those alternate pencils in our world, right?
And I would say even in the gen ed population, offering free reign and choice is also difficult. So we would limit those choices something as simple as, you know, you can answer this question any way you want. However, you know, maybe in your writing, I'm giving you sentence starters because I know that's what you need, and maybe for some other students, I'm expecting them to be able to write this, you know, very well crafted claim that has beautiful evidence and a great warrant, but someone else, I'm saying, hey, you know what, maybe you can only do your claim this time because I've seen that you've really been working on that, and that's a skill we're trying to build up. So even in our gen ed population, that differentiation for those specific students, depending on those formative assessments that we've seen in our classrooms, it's still important to work on, because we're trying to meet the kids where they're at even in those classes, but we're allowing them multiple ways to do that.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting when we can make these connections with gen ed. I mean, they're entirely different learning environments, right? And yet we've got some similarities. I love that.
Well, and maybe that's the part of the universal side of it, is that maybe the concept is that the learning environments aren't as different or as separated as we believe them to be, right? And that's the reason why design becomes so important, and that's that second portion. Differentiation is not a proactive design approach. It's not a design approach at all. It's a reactive approach, right? It's this student needs this right now, and that from what I have seen and what I have experienced, that puts teachers into a place of learning crisis, right? Because now they have to differentiate. I have to differentiate for Angelina. I have to differentiate for Armin, Brandy, so on and so forth, until I have this large group of 30 students, 20 students, even 15 students in front of me, that each one of them is getting something different. So then what are the things that are bringing them together? There's no universal anything there, right? So a proactive design approach allows us to say, what are some of the basics that we are going to put down, right? And the frameworks allow us to drive students towards being goal-oriented, right? So advocacy and self-choice, being expert learners, improving and showing their expertise and mastery, right? I'm sorry, excuse me, and being fully engaged. And that's I think, our big issues. Differentiation doesn't deal with engagement, right? Differentiation says, this is what you need, right? This is the whatever it may be that you need to keep on going, but it doesn't foster this continual idea of improvement for myself. Oops, sorry.
And Megan and I had even talked about in our school utopia, and Megan can take it away from me anytime she wants, that, you know, we would provide students the standards that we would have them assessed on, and then have them create their own learning goals and targets. You know, what do you know about this? Do a little bit of research, and then you prove to me that you're a master at the learning goal and target that you've developed and defined. And so, you know, over the next little bit here, while we're still collaborating and working through that, you know, that is my ultimate goal with the students in my classroom, for them to really, by second semester, be able to really create their own learning pathway.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I think it's something that has to be taught, though, that path is theirs to create, because like we kind of talked about earlier, oftentimes it's already laid out for them, and so given the choice, they kind of shy away from it because they've never had to really push themselves to think beyond what's been told to them, you know, or brought in front of them to do. A great example, so Angelina puts little trays of low-tech tools on her desks, and the kids have the ability to, if they're visual learners, highlight whenever they need to, or put post-it notes down, or circle things, and they're not. It's not a singled-out event. They're not. They don't need an accommodation or a 504 for that. It's something that's accessible to all students, and then they don't feel different or singled out because they need it. Everybody's using it. So in that respect, they're creating their learning, their own learning path.
Can I get back to something that I think Brandy brought up a while back, kind of shift things. But I think Brandy said something about it would be helpful to see a lesson plan because she had gone to the conference and had it in her head, kind of, or tried to make sense about what UDL is, and when you finally understand it cerebrally, then it becomes a challenge to put it into your everyday teaching practice. So when Brandy said that, I agreed that seeing lesson plans and seeing lessons in action are extremely helpful. So my question for the practitioners right now are, do you have any lesson plans that you have written up that have the principles of UDL embedded? And I know about the ones on the CAST website. They're great. But I'm curious if we have any in Oakland County at this point that we could view at some point in the future.
I know Brian and I were involved when those MESA units were written for the Oakland Schools. Right. There are UDL boxes, and I know he was a huge advocate for getting a UDL box on the Atlas. Mm-hmm. So I believe there are a number of resources for Oakland County. I don't know, about someone who's out in New York as far as national, but not much. But that is a resource we have in Oakland County.
So I guess I want to ask, if you don't mind, just one, as you're applying those MESA units in your classrooms, are you enhancing them in any way? Are you, changing them up? Are you finding them?
All day, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, what I find interesting, Jane, is that we stumbled upon these MESA units. And Jane, you were part of that work, and Laura was part of that work. Right. But in the high school, those MESA units, from the very start, they were UDL. They were constructed around a concept of UDL, right? They said this isn't the day-by-day planner, right? You shouldn't do this day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. But this is more like your map, a detailed map on how to get someplace, right? You get around this idea in ELA or around this curricular unit, and that you add the things that you need to add. You supplement the things that you need to, but that choice is yours, right? And that to me is the ultimate in UDL instructional design, right? So it's this concept of meta learning, isn't it? That we have teachers who are trying to conceptually wrap their heads around what the unit means to have so much freedom, yet also be there and say you can do this day by day if you so desire, and then to be able to say, well, then how do I differentiate this? A, or B, how do I redesign portions of this? And I think that's where we stumble, and that's where we begin to kind of step into it, because the idea of creating a meta learning experience and having it be encompassed, and think about that, and how do I change that around, So that's hard for us to undertake because we are trapped in our own design mentality. But those units are all online, and so Jules, you'll be able to get to those. And then Angelina just shared in the chat. She shared a lesson, history rhymes, that maybe you can talk about a little bit, Angelina, that you posted up there.
So this was a project that our Novi PLC created a couple of years ago, and it's been ever evolving. So this is kind of that scaffolded choice. This would be a good example of that. So students can choose one of the prior events and one of the current events, and then they have to show how they rhyme. So the second page is kind of like our bare minimum. So here, you create this PowerPoint, and if that's the only thing you can do, PowerPoint it is, go for it, and here you go. But then they are offered the opportunity to also kind of come up to the teacher and say, hey, but I have this idea, I'd rather make a video, or I'd rather make this comic book, or whatever kind of unique learning experience that they have. This is something that they can kind of take and make their own. So this is a project that my whole PLC, so every junior at Novi High School, this is, that's in world history, this is what they're going to do towards the end of the year. So, we're working our way towards, again, that increased level of choice for those students.
And I think that brings up another issue. it's very easy to, when beginning your work with UDL, or I find myself doing it a lot as well. That's why technology and UDL work so well together. But it's also why technology can sometimes be that crutch that we associate with UDL, because of that very idea that it is very easy to offer this choice matrix for students who want to multiply represent the ways that they understand material, or the knowledge that they have, by making a video, or you can make a website, or students make cartoons, or whatever it may be. They build it, and it's very easy for us to build it in technology. And so it's so easy, in fact, that there's this argument nationally where people are saying, well, UDL has to have technology to back it. So I wonder what everybody's thoughts are about that. Where do you sit on the fence on that?
I struggle with the technology piece, and I'm also a big history teacher, so my class is 100% online. But in my Gen Ed World History class, I struggle with implementing too much technology. A lot of the times I actually feel like those low-tech options that Megan was talking about, that are available to all students, are some of the better options to access my curriculum. But I mean, for those students that is their shining, like they shine using technology. They're those comp sci kids that they know that that's going to be their jam going forward. I would never deny them the opportunity to really show me what they can do in that arena. So it's a fine line for me how much technology I really want to implement in my classroom, and Megan can attest to it. It's very few times throughout the year that we kind of allow them free reign with that.
I found that I work with several different subjects to teachers, and I find that the ones who implement a lot of technology, it depends on the if that is the student's preference for showing what they know or their knowledge base, because oftentimes it can be like the first or second time they use that technology in the classroom, they almost get bored with that medium and they want something else then. So beyond the technology, how else can I present this information to you? So that was an interesting dynamic that I had never seen before, perhaps this technology age, that it was after the first few times they were almost done with it. So.
After looking at that lesson and hearing and knowing what the options were, I think that's with me when I was teaching at Edison Max and I was teaching several different core subjects, I did do UDL then. Now that I teach strategies, I think it's harder because I don't teach a specific area all the time. I kind of bounce off what the student needs and where a lot of times they come in to get support for their classes. So my lessons are 10 minutes long. They're really short. And so I guess trying to find a way to incorporate that into my classroom, that's what I'm going to do. But I know when I taught biology at Edison, we'd study a unit. At the end, the kids, some of the kids wrote songs, some wrote pamphlets, some did drawings, poster boards. That's how they displayed their knowledge of it at the end of the unit. So I guess, looking now and understanding a little bit better, I have been using UDL, but I guess less in the position that I am, if that makes sense.
So I have a thought. I think there's a little instructional piece that ties in with the technology that has to do with helping students learn, how to select the right mode to display what they know so that it matches the message and the audience they're trying to reach, so it doesn't turn into technology for technology's sake. Does that make sense to everybody else? Okay.
Yeah, you have to context, audience, and purpose. Those are huge pieces that play in I know in the Common Core especially with, what is the purpose of your message, what is the context within, which you're sharing it, and what is your intended audience. So I think I agree with that. For me, there seems to be an element of even teaching the technology as well when you're introducing your choice options. And that takes time too. You have to build in the education of that particular choice or technology piece instead of just saying, okay, here is your buffet. You've never had quinoa, but trust me, it's an option. I think there is an element of teaching the technology, so it isn't just technology for technology's sake. We chose a Google Hangout for a reason, and so tonight. So I think you're right. But I think that comes in educating context, audience, and purpose for those pieces as well.
So I think Adam Bello says it best. He did a great keynote where he says, date the tool, right? Marry the ability, right? Nobody wants to marry a tool, right? And that's ultimately what we do, right? So we say, well, we're going to use Padlet, and everybody's going to use it, or we're going to use Prezi, right? Or we're going to build a presentation, right? But we're not really looking at the ability of multiply representing that, right? So we say you can build a presentation, and hey, to provide choice for that, you can use Prezi, you can use Keynote, you can use Slides, or you can use PowerPoint. Those are all the same things, right? So that's really dating the tool, right, or marrying the tool, right? So I think that's I just love that phrase. I put it up everywhere that I can. Date the tool, marry the ability.
Yeah, that's good. Well, for the 1% population, you absolutely have to teach the technologies, and they have to be basic.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to practice.
Yeah.
It's critical.
And I think, wasn't it Jules who was talking about the formative assessment as well? I think that's where that piece ties in. Do we understand the choices? Do we understand the modes? Do we know the kids know? I think. I don't know.
Right. So we are about 10 minutes out from having to cut this hangout off, and I need some time to kind of plug some of the other stuff that we have going on. So, wondering if anybody has any final thoughts that they kind of around the horn. Anybody wants to say any final thoughts? Ted, you've been awful quiet over there. You're just kind of stoic and reserved, so taking it all in.
Well, I'm the farthest from being an expert compared to you guys. The school that I teach is so different in a way. The morning is academic and the afternoon is more explorative, where the kids use all kinds of different tools. We build things, and within that context, the kids are given lots of choice to kind of enter an activity at whatever level is comfortable for them. And then we try to just increase their skills.
It's past bedtime. It's 8 and a 4-4.
That's cute.
Give me 5 more minutes.
What is that?
Say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm working. Can you give me 2 more minutes?
Who is that?
Well, there's Auntie A. There's some other.
I just a final thought. I'd like to, just extend my thanks for everyone for joining us. And this was really about lessons and questions for us. And just kind of putting some of those questions out there that are burning. That we've all kind of been, knocking around since we had our UDL meeting a couple of months ago. And so I would just like to say thanks for another night of great collaboration and sharing.
Yeah, good ideas.
I'd like to echo that. I mean, this is really powerful, just to be together as a group and talking and thinking and sharing and, just helping each other along the journey. So it was really wonderful.
Thanks, Laura and Brian, for organizing this.
Oh, no, it was Angelina, Melissa, and Megan.
Well, thank all of you for your part.
Yeah. Really
And that-
thank them for stepping up and being leaders. So we need that. And now we have Armin and Brandy and Ted and Jules. And so, we're growing.
Right, and Melissa's training the next generation, which is great to see. So, and I think that it's important because important to note that in the rest of the country, on the East Coast, UDL it's wildfire, right? It's everywhere you look, and that's great. And there are organizations that are doing things nationally, but I'm really feeling like we're starting to find our momentum again in Michigan. And so I want to extend my thank you to our PLN4UDL Army and everybody that it incorporates for really trying to make that movement start to happen again. Because I think that returning to instructional design in this open concept is exactly where we need to go if we really want to change what schools are and what we've consistently thought of as schools, and reshape them and not have them fall prey to just a quick movement, but something that's sustainable.
Where to go to Miss Bush's room? No, she won't. She'll...
So, does anybody else have any final thoughts before I jump into the promotion machine?
I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight and opening up their minds and sharing their thoughts and knowledge about UDL, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I know. Can't wait.
Right, yeah, I think this was great for our first experiment, and I'm hoping that you guys organize some more and we get some other people floating in here. So with that, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen real quick, and we'll just talk about some of the things that we have coming up in the PLN4UDL. And for those of you that don't know what the PLN4UDL is, it is a grouping of, it's a professional learning network that surrounds itself with UDL, and Laura and I try to plan a lot of events and then also try to host as many events as possible and hook this up to national thought and research along with what's going on in Michigan and really try and make a movement happen. So with that, upcoming events, the next event is right after this one from 9 to 9:30. That's UDL chat in the Twitterverse, so you can hop over there, bring a friend. Today's topic is UDL advice to a colleague. Mindy Johnson from CAST will be running it with people like Kit Hart and Katie Novak pops in, and Louis Lord Nelson and John Mundorf, and tons of people join that as much as possible. I usually try to get over there myself. I've seen a couple of our PLN4UDL Army over there. But if you missed tonight's, don't worry. It happens every first and third Wednesday of the month from 9 to 9:30 Eastern Time. Then tomorrow, UDL IRN, which stands for Implementation Research Network, is hosting a hangout very similar to this with an accompanying UDL chat, and that's from 8 to 9. And we'll be talking about design studios, and if you enjoyed talking with Angelina and Melissa, Megan, myself, well, we're all going to be over there running that one tomorrow as well. So please join us over there. You can find the link to that at the UDL IRN website, udlirn.org. They have a summit coming up in March. You definitely want to check that out. Next week, we're going to hold our first off-site design lab. So if you are still wondering what UDL looks like or how you can incorporate it, we really encourage you to stop by the design lab. We're holding it at a Barnes & Noble. There'll be some cool giveaways, everything from Google Cardboards to PLN4UDL shirts to gift cards. So we're looking to get as many people there and pack it in as we can. It's a great collaborative space for people to just kind of work on bringing UDL into their practice and kind of sharing more lessons and things like that. And then finally, well, not finally, but one of the other things that we're offering this year, we finally got some dates settled for our UDL Now book study, which will be running through My Place and through a Google Hangout, much like this. We try to keep it to about 45 minutes. The dates are starting in January, second week of January, and ending the last week of March. And we try to do 2 chapters every 2 weeks. So we want to give people enough time to kind of read what they need to read. Our format is not like other book studies where we talk just about the theory. It is very much about what struck you, then talking about how it impacts our practice, and then walking away with an action plan at the end of our protocol, saying what we're going to try it on specifically the next week, and then sharing that when we come back. If you need to, if you need to sign up for that book study, we have a Google form, and then we will send the book to you. You do not have to pay for the book. We will just send it to you. If you haven't joined us in My Place, please do. myplacek12.org. You'll need a Google sign-in to get in there. What it is this very large collaborative grouping where we host our chats and we host resources in a Google Drive. We keep you updated on what we have going on. We keep you updated what's going on in the Twitterverse. We try to hook it up to what's going on nationally, give you the links to those. It's full of tons of resources and our own online modules that we are building and have built. And then finally, if you have not, as of yet, read the PLN4UDL blog, you are missing out. This is probably one of our best pieces of resources. Check it out. Actually, I would love to say that I contribute to that, but I don't. That is all Laura, and Laura's great writing and Laura's scouring of the interwebs, if you will, to find the best things out there for UDL, and then bringing great practitioners. So you can find that at the listing below, or just type it into Google. It's the #1 thing to come up. And Louis Lord Nelson voted it one of the top 5 UDL resources on the web right now. So check that out. That's what we have going on. Let me get out of this sharing, and then we will finish up. So, whoops. With that said, I would like to thank everybody, and I would like to thank Angelina, Melissa, Megan, Jane, and Ted, or Jed, as we started calling them, Brandy, and Armin.
Their rock star name.
Yeah, exactly. That's their celebrity couple name. They like to stay hidden, but they are celebrities. And everybody else that took their time tonight to hang out with us. And so this will be archived and put within that My Place or on our YouTube channel. So check it out. If you do have questions after viewing it, it's very easy. We'll put in the show notes how to get a hold of everybody that kind of hosted it tonight. So with that, thank you, everybody. Get yourselves over to UDL chat.
Bye. Thanks all.
Bye.